Today we tell the story of William Upchurch IV, who was head of Upchurch Clan number 9. He's one of 22 heads of clans, each one a member of the 5th generation of the family in America. When I start to tell the story of one of the clans, the first thing I do is pull out their biofile and all the information in it that I've gathered over the years from different people and different publications makes a part of the story. I also turn to the outline of the family, which I have in notebooks, and William Upchurch IV and all of his thousands of descendants are recorded in this particular notebook. The story really starts in Brunswick County, Virginia, as so many of the early Upchurch stories do. Now, we have quite a few bits of information for William Upchurch IV, enough to make a framework for the family. Of course, we always want more, and by diligent study, we should be able to write a really comprehensive book about this clan headed by William Upchurch IV. To start out with, let's give some framework to the family by looking at the 5-generation chart we often turn to. And here we see this chart headed by Michael Upchurch I, who came to America from England in 1638. Followed by his son Richard I, and for this particular presentation we go on to his son James I, who heads what we call the James Upchurch tribe of the family in America, one of 2 such tribes. And then we go from James Upchurch I to his son Michael Upchurch III, who headed the Brunswick branch of the family in America, and from Michael Upchurch III to his 4 children, and in particular to the one we mentioned today, William Upchurch IV. Now, let's go from there to the chart of Virginia, which shows how the family migrated from Surry County, Virginia, where Michael lived and died in 1681, with his children moving on south and west, largely to Brunswick County, Virginia, which we see here. So let's sort of tell the story of Brunswick County as it relates to William Upchurch IV. He was well ensconced in that county because his father, Michael Upchurch III, actually was born in that county and died in that county, so he lived his entire life. Furthermore, his grandfather, James Upchurch I, although he was not born in that county, he died there in 1765. So if you were a young man, William Upchurch IV, growing up in Brunswick County, Virginia, you had a great heritage in that county, and there's more richness of Upchurch data there than has met the eye yet, and it all has to be dug out and explained and the implications realized. Now, what happened to the William Upchurch IV in Brunswick County, Virginia? He was born there about 1745, and he married in due course, within about 20 years, a lady named Sarah. And we will have more to say about Sarah later on because she lived on beyond her husband, and we have more to tell about her. But in Brunswick County, their first children were born. The first one was William Upchurch, named after his father, and secondly, a son David, born about 1765. So those were the 2 children we are fairly certain were born in Brunswick County, Virginia. We hope to find more details about William Upchurch IV there, but let's move on to what happened to him next. Sometime after the birth of his son David in 1765, he moved across the North Carolina line into Granville County, North Carolina. And in North Carolina then, his next son was born, John Upchurch V, born about 1772. So we know that William Upchurch IV was in North Carolina, probably in Granville County, as early as 1772. Let's look at the North Carolina map, which shows where the Upchurches were located at a certain point in time, about the time of the first federal census in 1790. And in Granville County, North Carolina, where William Upchurch IV was found, we have a record of him being on the tax roll in 1771. And we know then that the son John Upchurch IV was born shortly thereafter. Furthermore, one of his other sons, the older son we had mentioned earlier, William, married in Granville County a lady by the name of Mary Hudspeth. And there's much more to be learned there about that. Now, I don't think the son, William Upchurch, stayed in that county on to the end of his life, because we'll have mention of him later on where he moved elsewhere. But by about 1782, William Upchurch IV had moved west from the Granville County, North Carolina, to Wilkes County, and you will see that on our map. It's in the northwestern part of Wake County, and that's why we entitle this article William Upchurch IV, Mountain Man. We have other records that indicate the linkage between William Upchurch IV and his son William, because in 1782 we have a record that William Upchurch of Wilkes County sells land to William Upchurch Jr. in Granville County, North Carolina. Now, we don't have the original record of this purchase of land by William Upchurch IV in Granville County, but that's something we need to look for. So, in summary, we might say that William Upchurch IV more or less passed through Granville County, North Carolina, on his way to Wilkes. Let's now tell the story of William Upchurch IV in Wilkes County. So we know he was there by the early 1780s. We in fact found his wife Sarah as a taxpayer there in Wilkes in 1782. Now, just why Sarah would be listed as a taxpayer, I don't know. Normally it was the head of the household. We soon have William Upchurch IV showing up there and having some record of his presence there. But the most definitive information we have about William Upchurch IV in Wilkes County is that he died there in the mid to late 1700s. His will was probated in 1787, and in that will we learn a great deal of information about his family. The family continued to have some presence in the general area, because afterwards we find some activity in the way of land transactions for the family. From 1790 on, for a few years, we find that in Ashe and Surrey counties, which were nearby, descendants of William Upchurch IV were being given land grants. We need to know more about that. Also, we note that in 1794, Sarah, the widow, buys a 105-acre tract of land in Wilkes County. That's another definitive bit of information about the family of William Upchurch IV. Let's talk a little bit about the will, because that is a very useful bit of information. It's definitive and it gives us hard information. There's some peculiar aspects about it. In the will, William Upchurch IV made a definitive statement that he did not want any of the assets of his property used to pay for debts incurred after his death. I would suspect William Upchurch IV must have been one of those people who really just didn't like debt. Enough so that he detested it and put it in his will. Basically, he left his assets to Sarah and what he says his 5 children. But we'll have to think about the number 5 more. He did not leave any land, and one presumes that he had arrived there not too long before his death and did not have time to acquire land, although more searching of the records may prove us wrong. In his will, we find definitely named 3 sons. the aforementioned William, and a son David, and a son John the Fourth. And we have more details about those three sons, and we can tell you about their descendants and where they were located. And before we finish this little presentation, we'll tell you a little bit about where they moved. But there were other interesting things in the will. For example, he says, I cut off my son William with 1 shilling. I cut off my daughters Elizabeth, Sarah, and Amy with 1 shilling. Now, I think we can make up to 10 children in the family. So it's a little bit of a peculiarity as to why in his will he said he left his assets to Sarah and his 5 children. My thought might be that perhaps the girls had already married and were living with their husbands and perhaps had adequate resources, and he saw fit not to give them anything, and in fact to sort of more or less disinherit them by saying they would get 1 shilling. So maybe the 5 children were the others, perhaps the minor children or the ones that left that needed to be cared for. He gave other indications in the will as to what to be done. He designated his son David as his executor and left him a horse. And for John the Fourth, he left him a mare or the worth. That's an interesting bit of terminology in a will. So I suppose William Upchurch IV was thinking, well, the mare might disappear somehow, or she might be stolen, or she might die, or whatever, but I want John the Fourth to have something, so if the mare's not around, he gets the worth of the mare. Now, there's some additional very hard and good information in the will. For example, for 5 of his daughters, he names their husband's last name. Patty married a Good, Elizabeth married a Rein, R-E-I-N, Sarah married a Pillow, Amy married a Lunsford, and Susanna married a Pinnell. So with these 5 marriages, we have some hints where more research can be done to see if we can find out where those people lived and where they moved and how many children they had and so on. There were 2 other children mentioned in the will that lead to some confusion. One is, there was one called Eddie, E-D-D-Y, and I don't know if that stands for Edward or Edith, but in any case, we never again found a trace for either an Edith or an Edward. Perhaps we shall yet do so. But there was another one that brought on a great deal of confusion. That one, as best one could read the will, seems to be A-S-A-L. And that seems like a peculiar name. But some of our early researchers in the 1950s read that as A-B-E-L, and they laid down a false track for us. We then found that a great number of descendants of Abel Upchurch were shown as being a descendant of William Upchurch IV, only to later learn that the real Abel didn't belong to William Upchurch IV at all. He was a member of a different part of the family. So we have incorrect information in the records at different points showing that certain individuals were descendants of Abel Upchurch that they claim was a son of William Upchurch IV, and that's completely incorrect. As far as we know, we never really heard from the real person again, whether it was named A-S-A-L, or perhaps in other terminology they had called it A-F-A-L. And we don't, for a fact, know whether that person was a male or a female. So the great strength we have from all of these records is that we do have definitive information about those 3 sons, William, David, and John. So now William Upchurch IV is deceased, and what happens next? I've mentioned that some land transactions still took place in the county of Wilkes and nearby counties, but in fact we soon find the family in Greenville County, South Carolina. They were there by 1800 as the census shows, and furthermore this piece of land that we mentioned earlier, the 105 acres that widow Sarah bought, she sold that in 1802, showing at the time that she was living in Greenville, South Carolina. And that will was witnessed by her son David. Sarah was on that 1800 census with 2 slaves and 2 daughters who were shown to be aged 16 to 26 years of age, meaning they were born between 1774 and 1784, which makes sense given all of what else we know. Now her son John Upchurch V was in a different household, already married, and had children born there. But we can tell you more about going beyond South Carolina because the family, lock, stock, and barrel, seemed to soon move west. And we've enjoyed learning over the years something about those 3 children, in particular 2 of them in great detail. The older son, William Upchurch, we think died in 1861 in Saline County, Illinois, and we have sparse records for him, and I think that deserves more research. The son, David Upchurch, definitely died in 1835 in Franklin County, Illinois, and is buried in the Drake Cemetery in Williamson County, Illinois. That's in southern Illinois, and I'm proud to say that I have been to that very same cemetery, Drake Cemetery, and inspected the burial sites of the members of this family. There was a son of David Upchurch, this one who's buried in the Drake Cemetery, by the name of William B. Upchurch, who was born in 1809 in Stewart County, Tennessee. Now we have many records for that William B. Upchurch, but I mention him here because it shows that David, although he probably did go to Greenville, South Carolina with his family, he soon moved west, and Stewart County, Tennessee, and western Tennessee is in fact a frequent stopping place for people moving west in the United States. And finally we mentioned John Upchurch V, who died in 1854 in Henry County, Tennessee, and is buried in the Horton Cemetery there. And I can say that I'm also proud to have visited that very same cemetery. He had married back in South Carolina in 1800 Elizabeth Hawkins. We have learned a great deal more about this John Upchurch V. He was a prominent individual in Henry County, Tennessee. His family was not the only Upchurch family in that county, but that leads us to a different story we'll tell another day. We're certainly pleased that we've been able to pick up enough fragments of the family of William Upchurch IV to give you this little story about how his life unfolded. And we look forward to learning more about him in due course.